I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that felt foreign even to me. Not what it looks like. Are you serious right now? Jess, I've seen it all. Every kiss, every touch, every filthy word you whispered to my brother in my house. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, my hands clenched in a fist at my sides. I was sitting in the parking lot of the grocery store, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed in the cup holder for the third time. It was Jessica again, my wife of 12 years. I stared at her name on the screen, my chest tightening with a sensation I hadn't felt in years. Earlier that day, while checking the alerts on our home security app, something unusual caught my eye. I'd installed the cameras myself, top of the line, full-color night vision, so I knew their placement better than anyone. The alert came from the back patio, where we rarely got activity. Curious, I opened the app to review the footage. What I saw made my stomach drop. The clip showed Jessica leaning against the patio door frame, laughing. Not a regular laugh either. It was the laugh she used when she was flirting, the one I hadn't heard in years. Standing in front of her was a man, but not just any man. It was Matt, my younger brother. At first, I told myself I was misinterpreting it. Siblings in law could laugh together. It wasn't a crime. But then Matt leaned in, placing his hand on her hip. She didn't push him away. Instead, she smiled up at him, her hand brushing his arm in a way that made me want to vomit. I replayed the clip 5 times, each time noticing more details I hadn't caught before, the way Jessica's body language tilted toward him, the quick glance over her shoulder as if to make sure no one was watching, the lingering touch of Matt's hand on her back. I didn't say anything when I first saw it. Not to Jessica. Not to Matt. Hell, not even to myself. I just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. When I got home that evening, Jessica greeted me at the door with her usual bright smile, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, wearing the yoga pants I liked. She handed me a glass of sweet tea and asked how my day was. "How was your day, Jess?" I asked, watching her closely. "Good. Just the usual, errands, gym, and lunch with Tiffany," she said, her smile unwavering. "She was good. Too good." "Oh yeah?" I said, setting my tea on the counter. What did Tiffany have to say about life? She paused for a fraction of a second before answering. "Oh, we just gossiped about the kids' school stuff. Nothing special." I nodded, biting my tongue, so hard I tasted blood. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted more than just that one video clip. That night, while Jessica was taking her usual hour-long bath, I logged into the security camera system from my laptop. I scrolled through days' worth of footage, my heart sinking lower with each passing minute. What I found confirmed everything I was afraid to admit. Jessica and Matt had been meeting at our house during the hours I was at work. Sometimes it was just a quick exchange, a hug that lingered too long, or a whispered conversation on the patio. Other times it was more, much more. I watched in stunned silence as Matt followed her into our bedroom one afternoon, closing the door behind him. I couldn't look away, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop. I sat there, forcing myself to watch the people I trusted most in the world betray me in the worst way imaginable. But I said nothing. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even when Matt showed up at our house for Sunday dinner like nothing had happened. I shook his hand, drank a beer with him on the porch, and pretended everything was fine. Meanwhile, every time Jessica looked at me, I could feel my stomach churn. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. Instead, I decided to keep watching. The cameras didn't lie. They'd show me everything I needed to know. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but pride wasn't something I had much left of at this point. After weeks of watching Jessica and Matt through the patio cameras, I reached a point where I needed more. I told myself it wasn't about feeding my suspicions anymore. I knew what was happening. This was about control, about knowing the truth in its raw, unfiltered form. So, one night after Jessica went to bed, I installed a new camera. I'd picked it up the day before, a discreet device no bigger than a matchbox. It had a wide-angle lens and could be hidden easily among the clutter of our bedroom. I placed it in the corner, just behind the stack of books Jessica kept on her dresser. It was the perfect spot, high enough to capture the entire room, but subtle enough that no one would notice. The first time I pulled up the footage, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. It felt like crossing a line I couldn't come back from. But as soon as I hit play, all that hesitation disappeared. The screen flickered to life, and there they were, Jessica and Matt standing in my bedroom in my house. At first, it was nothing new, just the same flirtatious laughter, the same touches that lingered a second too long. But then Jessica reached for Matt's hand, pulling him toward the bed. I should have looked away. I should have turned off the screen, smashed my laptop, done something. Instead, I sat there, frozen, watching it all unfold like I was seeing a scene from someone else's life. The worst part? As much as it tore me apart, I couldn't stop watching. I started telling myself things to justify it. You need evidence. You need to understand how far this has gone. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Some sick, twisted part of me was intrigued. It wasn't just anger fueling me anymore. It was something darker, something I didn't want to name. The next day, I went through my usual routine. I kissed Jessica goodbye as I left for work, smiled when she handed me my lunch, and waved to Matt as he pulled up in his truck to borrow some tools. All the while, I knew what would happen the second I walked out that door. Sure enough, when I logged into the cameras later that afternoon, there they were again. This time, Jessica was wearing the black dress I bought her for our anniversary, the one she hadn't worn for me in years. I watched as she twirled for Matt, laughing when he pulled her close. It should have made me furious, but instead I felt something else. It was like watching a car crash, horrific, but impossible to look away from. Days turned into weeks, and my obsession grew. I started staying up late, watching hours of footage, analyzing every word, every movement, every glance they shared. It was like peeling back layers of a person I thought I knew, only to find a stranger underneath. And then one night I caught myself thinking something that stopped me cold. You like this? The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. At first I denied it. How could I possibly enjoy watching the woman I loved betray me with my own brother? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was a part of me, a small, dark part, that did. Maybe it was the power of knowing their secret, of holding something over both of them without them ever suspecting. Maybe it was the thrill of seeing Jessica in a way I hadn't seen her in years, alive, uninhibited, raw. Or maybe it was just a madness setting in. Whatever it was, I couldn't stop. Every night, after Jessica fell asleep beside me, I'd replay the footage, analyzing every detail. I told myself it was for closure, for clarity, but the truth was I didn't want it to end. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go. I wanted to know what they were willing to risk. And most of all, I wanted to know what it would take for me to finally confront them. I wasn't sleeping much anymore. How could I? Every night, after Jessica fell asleep, I stayed up, watching and rewatching the footage from the bedroom cameras. It had become a ritual, a twisted, addictive habit that I couldn't shake. The guilt gnawed at me, but so did the curiosity. Every time I thought I'd seen the worst of it, Jessica and Matt proved me wrong. They were reckless, almost daring to get caught. And maybe that's what made it impossible for me to stop watching. But then, one night, they crossed a line I didn't even know existed. It was a Thursday evening. I'd been at the office late, intentionally delaying my drive home because I couldn't stomach another fake smile from Jessica. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark, except for the faint glow of the bedroom light. I logged into the camera feed from my phone before stepping inside. Jessica and Matt were there, just as I expected. But this time, they weren't alone. My stomach dropped as I watched Jessica open a bottle of wine and pour 3 glasses. Sitting across from her, looking far too comfortable, was another man. I recognized him immediately, Tyler, one of Matt's drinking buddies. The scene played out in real time on my screen. Jessica laughed as she handed Tyler a glass, brushing his hand in a way that made my blood boil. Matt leaned back in the chair, smirking like he owned the place. They were talking, but I couldn't make out the words. Then Jessica leaned over and whispered something to Tyler, and he laughed, a deep, knowing laugh that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was something else entirely. I sat in my car, paralyzed, as the 3 of them disappeared into the bedroom. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to storm inside, rip the door off its hinges, and end it right there. But instead, I stayed frozen, watching through the tiny screen in my hand. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek before I left for work, telling me to drive safe. I wanted to grab her, shake her, scream in her face. How could you do this to me? But I didn't. Instead, I smiled and told her I'd see her later. That day at work, I couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Jessica, Matt, and Tyler, laughing and drinking in my house, desecrating my bedroom. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to make them pay. When I got home that evening, Jessica was in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables. She looked so serene, so normal, that for a moment, I questioned everything. Could I have imagined it? No, the footage didn't lie. I stood there, watching her, and a thought crossed my mind. If she could be so casual, so carefree, maybe I could too. Hey Jess, I said, leaning against the counter. I was thinking we should have Matt over for dinner this weekend. It's been a while. Her hand paused for a split second before continuing. That's a great idea, she said, her voice light. I'll text him and see if he's free. I smiled, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. She had no idea what I knew. Over the next few days, I began to plan. Not just a dinner, but what I would do next. Watching wasn't enough anymore. I needed to act. But I wanted it to be perfect. On Saturday night, Matt showed up right on time, carrying a six-pack of beer like he always did. Jessica greeted him at the door with a hug that lingered a little too long. I pretended not to notice, laughing and joking with him like everything was normal. But inside, I was seething. I poured us all drinks and sat across from them at the table, studying their every move. Jessica was good, too good. She kept the conversation light, asking Matt about work, laughing at his jokes. But Matt, he wasn't as smooth. There was a nervous edge to him, a flicker of guilt in his eyes every time he glanced my way. Halfway through dinner, I leaned back in my chair and said, "Hey Matt, do you remember that security system I installed a few months ago?" His fork froze halfway to his mouth. "Yeah, why?" I smiled, savoring the moment. "No reason. Just thought it was a good investment. You never know what you'll catch on camera." Jessica's hand twitched, her wine glass trembling slightly. For the first time in weeks, I saw fear in her eyes. I didn't push it further, not yet. I wanted to let them stew in their own paranoia. The real confrontation was coming, but not tonight. Tonight was just the appetizer. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Jessica's steady breathing beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, power. They thought they were in control, that they were playing me for a fool. But the game had just begun, and I was about to rewrite the rules. By the time Sunday morning rolled around, I had everything planned to the last detail. For weeks, I'd been the silent observer, letting Jessica and Matt act out their betrayal on my screens like actors in some twisted reality show. But today, the cameras wouldn't just capture their actions, they'd capture mine. Jessica was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone as if she didn't have a care in the world. She was wearing that same black dress, the one that used to make my chest swell with pride when I saw her in it. Now it only made my stomach turn. "Hey Jess," I said, leaning casually against the counter. "Can you come into the living room? I need to show you something." She glanced up, her smile as fake as the love she'd been faking for me. "Sure. What's up?" I led her to the couch and gestured for her to sit down. She looked at me quizzically as I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice just a little too steady. "You'll see," I said, pressing play. The screen came to life, and there they were, Jessica and Matt, tangled together in our bed. The color drained from her face instantly. She sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. What is this?" she stammered, finally finding her voice. "Oh, come on, Jess," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. "You're a smart woman.